Hi, I'm Cassandra Brush, and you are watching Zero Waste Central, where we talk about and with people who are practicing zero waste in their lifestyles and in the community. Today we have Annegret Pollard with us. She is a historian and retired professor, and more importantly, a zero waste enthusiast. She's going to teach us about some ways that she practices zero waste in her own lifestyle, or perhaps I should say, Annegret, you work toward zero waste in your lifestyle. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And does the term zero waste describe your lifestyle, or was that a little further along for you?
I think it is practically idealistic. I'm not quite there.
Okay.
I'm practicing to get to less and less that I have to discard.
So before we start the conversation, just to give viewers an idea, you had mentioned to me that about once every 3 to 4 months you have around a 13-gallon trash bag for yourself. So you do have waste, but it's not very much.
It is not very much, and I could probably do away with this if I could figure out on my land how to disarm this stuff, so that I don't have any spoilage or anything that is in another way inappropriate to have outside. So that's all. And plastic is still, to some degree, a problem. Most plastic I can recycle now, but there are a few things I can't. And
plastic is what a lot of people come down to when they're looking at this. So, and just to clarify for my daily job at the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, we're always talking about zero waste, but there's this understanding that I don't think anybody expects actual zero waste, certainly not now or even in the next 5 years. And people look at saying if you eliminate 90% of your current waste, then that's actually called zero waste, even though there is still a small amount. And a lot of it is those plastics or other kind of waste that really isn't an option.
Right.
So that said, could you tell me why this interests you, why you are reducing your waste so thoroughly?
Yes, I don't think waste is a very good thing to have around. And also, we don't seem to pay a lot of attention to how we waste, how wasteful our life is, and how, with this wastefulness, we deprive other people from having enough. For example, a few years ago, I got onto this little saying I tell myself: what I don't use doesn't have to be produced, or it's available to others.
That's a good point.
Except the oil companies don't like that, because they don't make enough money of people like me. And so, but what it helped me do was to assess how well organized or how poorly I organized my work. And because I was very busy, I decided I better get better organized. And then it became a competition with me against the system. So I decided, we have a competition, this is loads of fun. How little can I get away with? And how can I, by doing that, improve my own ways of doing things? And in a sense, make this a way of life. And if it becomes a way of life, it is not so strenuous, except that I'm a single old person, and I haven't got very much going on, and it's not the same as a household with many kids who are not used to getting organized in that fashion, and for whom that may be a little bit more awkward and unusual.
It sounds to me, first of all, I love that your motivation, going back to the root of it, was really to not deprive others.
Yes.
And the fact that you've set in place systems consciously. And maybe, and you're absolutely right, it's totally different for every household. The exciting thing about if a family decides to try this is that it can be fun. I like this competition idea. It could be a competition between kids. It could be a fun thing for kids to see how they could weigh do their own trash audits. But
you can even have fun turning off the lights.
Right.
Maybe not totally, but who turned off the most lights? Exactly. Or who did it well? Or who did his or her room particularly well? How did you organize this and so forth? And what have we all put together that we need to dispose of?
There's a couple layers of what you said that I'd like to touch on. One is that you said you saw what you could do without, what you don't need. And the other is that the organizational piece. You need, in order to not have waste, you need to rearrange. Most of us need to rearrange the way we do things.
Right.
So maybe you could start with this idea of refusing, of not bringing things in the first place.
Yes, there is that. And then I also think about how I cook. And I like to cook.
Okay.
I don't really do a whole lot of that right now, but I figure out how I need the least gas for certain dishes. Right? And this is a pure guess on my part. But if I think I have done again what I wanted to, and that is reduce fuel use, reduce what I would otherwise have just casually thrown in there and done away with and what have you all, I'm pleased with that because I'm winning.
Right, again, you against the system.
It's again, me against myself and the system, exactly. And it's fun. And besides, I think there is actually a useful part of this competition, and that is to become efficient, which gives me more time for other things. So it's a way of life that I use when I cook, when I clean house, if I do laundry, and when I'm working outside in the garden. I do this all the time.
So before you do anything, you think it through, how can I do this
kind
the most
of,
efficiently?
or I think while I'm going,
right.
you know, and change things, or I find that if I pay attention, I actually get more done.
Right.
And then I don't have to drag on.
The paying attention part where most of us struggle. And so can you give me some examples of what that looks like on a really concrete basis?
Let's say I have my various helpers. My garden tools are my helpers. My stuff in the kitchen, these are my helpers. The hot water is available, cold, all of this is available. And I try to simply figure out as I go about my job what I need. Do it, get ready for it, and then go through with it.
And what about when we talk about waste, I'm thinking not only just in terms of energy and efficiency, but the actual solid waste, meaning trash. And when I use the word refuse, I guess I should have backed up and talked about these 5 R's that you and I talked about earlier.
Yes.
The one everyone's familiar with is the recycle, reuse, recycle. Wait, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Right.
And at the solid waste management district, we have reduce, reuse, recycle, rot, which is the composting. And there are people more extreme than that who say refuse, reduce, reuse, rot, and then very, very last is recycle, and then the trash is supposed to not even be there. So I'd like to talk about the refuse and the reduce. About before you even get to how are you going to handle the recycling and the composting, you have to think about what comes into your household.
Exactly, and if I think that it is going to be burdensome, I won't get it.
So can you, what have you decided you might not get if it could be burdensome?
Lots of plastic, which would be fast and easy to pitch and so forth, or things that I can't handle very well by myself. And that would be not interesting for people where there are enough hands to do it. But also, if I cannot easily dispose of it in the compost, and I have a vermiculture, and I'm testing them at this point.
Your vermiculture?
My vermiculture, I'm asking the worms to digest unbleached paper towels.
Oh, I've heard they can do that.
I just toss it in, and I toss in bones with little scraps of meat on them, and I say, clean that up. And then I check it when I dig up the soil to see how well they did. And it's amazing what they will do. They can take a whole bird, and at the end there is nothing left but a cleaned up feather-light skeleton. No sign of feathers, nothing.
Even the feathers?
The feathers disappear.
Wow.
And so if they can do this, you know, then I know I can take on more.
Right.
And maybe in the composting, I can also do more than I have learned to do so far, but they do it.
Right. So just in case any viewers haven't heard the term vermicomposting, this is where you actually have a worm bin, and the worms are
I have a
consuming.
Box. I have a box. People in Greensboro Bend are making these, and I have one that is this big, about this high, this wide. I divide it in the middle, and then I fill this, and the worms all gravitate towards this and work over here, and then when I need to go here, they continue to work here, and then they migrate here. So I have something to take out all the time, and that gives me not only soil for transplanting house plants and putting on tomatoes and in the garden in general, but if I keep it moist enough, the box leaks, which is not supposed to do. And I catch that leakage, and that is my worm tea.
Oh, yeah.
The house plants love it.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're not having that with your friends. That's for the plants.
Exactly.
It's like...
But you see, you give me an idea. If you add champagne, maybe you could drink it, but I doubt it. So
yeah, yes. But I just want to clarify that what I think I hear you saying is that one of the ways that you're able to keep more stuff out of the trash and reduce your ultimate waste output is by composting, but then with the vermicomposting, there's more items that you can compost that you might not have put in your normal backyard compost.
Yes, and in the winter, it's very difficult to put things out back.
Right.
And they sometimes attract animals because you can't bury that stuff very bad. Yeah. So yes, I have the worms, and they stay with me, and sometimes if I'm inadvertently pitch something from a lemon or orange in there, I get an eruption of fruit flies, which is very unpleasant. But eventually they give up too.
Right.
And on we go.
And I just want to mention that for people who, I personally would love to try out vermicomposting, but not everyone wants to go that deep. But we do, the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District does have some limited residential composting drop-offs in Hardwick, and also in Montpelier at DJ's convenience store. People can bring food scraps.
That's very important to know.
It is, and also at our Ark and Berry, people can bring, and in those food scraps, they can include bones and paper towels and dairy and the kinds of things that people may not want to put in their backyard compost.
Exactly.
So there are a couple options for that.
Right, and I wanted to ask you if you would like me to show you something which I learned from my daughter.
Yes.
About how to make a compost container for outside.
Okay.
That is very, very easy.
Sure.
If we had a cylinder of some sort, let's say you take about 2.5 yards of a moderately meshed chicken wire, because you're going to construct a rotund vertical container, and on each end of it you fix a slat of wood. Put these together and then put a hook and an eye, and there is your worm compost, not worm, but your compost container, and you just dump things in. And possibly leaves over the top so that that can rot. And if it gets full, or you think, well, it should really be turned over by now in order to break down properly, well, release these latches, take it away, and there you have a heap. Put this back together right next door and spoon it back in, and you have turned everything over, and it is breaking down in a very, very short time.
I think my father used to do that, the same idea with the cylinder of either chicken wire or that larger gauge fencing, I don't remember what it's called, and he would plant all his tomatoes in it and add the compost as they were growing. They were the happiest tomatoes.
Interesting.
And then at the end of the growing season, he would unlatch it, just leave the pile there, and till it into the garden later, or just hand.
That's a great idea, and I shall try that out. Very good.
So composting is obviously a really big part about going zero waste.
I think so.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to pay fees, this little bit of trash I have pays for my recycling. That's the other big option, because there is no way I can compost all the paper that comes into my house, or other kinds of things that I don't want to deal with. And yet I know they're taken care of. And composting, anybody should think, you know, we produce what should be composted. And in that sense, it is a very valuable part of the cycle of life.
And one, it absolutely is. I always composted not because I was thinking about landfills, but because I was thinking about my garden and it was a resource. And I think I think there's becoming more and more people who are understanding and recognizing that.
Yeah. And we only have one landfill now.
I know. That
should give everybody perhaps a headache and think about what they're not going to be able to dispose of.
Right. Or perhaps excitement that maybe this is an opportunity now that the Moortown landfill is officially closed now. They're not taking anything. So that leaves us with Coventry.
That's right.
I think it's an exciting opportunity where we could make a choice as a state to invest in infrastructure that will support zero waste.
How about that?
More composting facilities, more places like the ARC, the Additional Recyclables Collection Center, where we take those hard-to-recycle items like the bottle caps.
And what others do you take?
Well, the list is about this long, but we take CDs, DVDs, VHS cassettes.
Oh, these kinds of things.
Yes, weird things that there didn't used to be a stream for. We even take like pellet bags from people who have pellet stoves. We take cell phones, batteries. We've done a whole episode just on the ARC, and I'll get that information out to you.
Wonderful.
But so the closing of the landfill is a big deal, and that's partly why we're doing what we're doing, because we would love to see people take this as sort of a seize the day. Hey, it's inconvenient, but
we can.
Yeah.
We know how.
Right.
It's just having to do it.
And what I'd like to come down to now, I actually saw, and I follow a lot of front porch forums.
Yes.
And a gentleman recently posted today, actually, that he was basically posting to his neighbors, the Moortown landfill is closed. I have this load of trash I take once a month. What am I going to do now? And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way right now. It feels very immediate. The idea of zero waste feels like, oh, that's too big. I can't do that now. What do I do right now with my trash? And I'd like to talk about people who are sort of like, oh no, what do we do? What might be some ways that people who haven't really thought about reducing, or either reducing input or output, how could they get started?
I like this question very much, because I'm occupying my thinking these days with how can we remake communities. Because I think we have all gone our own way. Everything has been so facilitating to a person's individual whims, let's say, or wants. And all of a sudden, here we are, and one function closes, and we are sitting here not knowing what to do. And I would like just to talk with our neighbors, even perhaps for the first time, and say, what do you do? And together, not just reject ideas, but entertain what other people are thinking, and perhaps come up with something nobody has thought of doing, and help each other that way.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor ways that people can fit into this.
I think so.
I mean, even ideas such as people sharing large items like rototillers or, pruners, or I don't know, shredder, tree shredders, those kinds of large items, or renting. Some neighborhoods I've heard they'll rent the shredding truck for the neighborhood, or that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Sharing tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also in the process of disposing of these difficult items, learning what you don't want to do, or what you don't need. Right. And because you maybe don't need it really, you can do without it.
And the idea of thinking about when you obtain something, whether you're buying it new or used or anything, of being conscious of what's going to happen to it after you obtain it.
Exactly.
That I don't think we're, as a culture, in that mindset currently.
No, that's become rather obsolete, because we think we can do anything. And absolutely anything that occurs to us ought to be done. And so if we don't want it anymore, we pitch it.
Right.
Well, times have changed.
And just quickly going back to the compost, the other piece of, and I'm sure you know this, but I just want to verbalize it, that when the organic matter, such as food scraps or yard waste, goes into the landfills, they create methane. And there are, the Coventry landfill has a really good methane recovery system.
That's right.
But it's not 100%. And the methane created in landfills, the number I've recently researched was it is 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide.
That's correct. That's
72 times.
And that's an enormous amount when you think about it. And it is that part we don't have under control.
Right.
And don't really know how. Right. And so I think people there again, there are probably people out there who know how to approach this, even if we don't all have to have a landfill with a tube. But for example, the Highfields people in Hardwick are really beginning to move into capturing methane as it might be produced by rotting substances.
Interesting.
And capturing it there to use in the household to burn, heat with, or whatever they need.
It is fascinating to me, the methane capturing systems that exist.
And we can do it individually. We don't have to go to a big landfill or have great specialists. Highfields is getting down to it where anybody could do it.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. And I just want to mention that, and what's interesting to me about this methane is that when you look at all the factors that contribute to the global climate change we're now experiencing, if you look at the percentage-wise, methane is small on the percentage-wise, but its effect is gigantic. And there's a lot of natural methane release. A lot of it has been exacerbated because of the warming, but we can control this. This is a pace. You and I have control over our contribution to that.
We can decide just what we're going to do with the methane-producing substances.
Right.
That's where it starts, and that is where the problem is solved.
Right. Yeah. So by turning your food scraps, keeping them out of the trash, reducing your waste, turning them into a resource, you're also keeping a large amount of methane from being produced in the landfill.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it is produced on a smaller scale in a compost pile.
And it is also, well, I mean, if you look at who produces it, right, we look at a person. So I'm having a person-sized production of methane. And I think I can control it because the worms like it warm, but they don't have to have it warmer than 45 degrees. So in a sense, the environment around that remains cool. They thrive, and this stuff is consumed before it becomes an emission.
We should do a whole other episode just on vermicomposting.
Yeah, you know, and we could have the experts who are around here to really show us and tell us what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. I do want to go back to the story we talked about before we started filming about one of my colleagues, Amanda, ran into you at the co-op in Hardwick, Buffalo Mountain Co-op. Didn't know who you were, but observed your interaction where, and you can correct me if I have the story wrong, but you were looking at a purchase and you were asking the person who worked there about the packaging, if it was recyclable. You found out that one piece, they didn't believe that one piece of the packaging was recyclable.
Exactly.
So you chose not to buy that product.
Yeah.
So could you speak to that? That's part of that choice you make when you think about the other end before you purchase.
Yes, because I was interested in deciding whether I would reuse this container or not. And I couldn't think of having any use for it at that point, and so I decided not to have it. And I think that's just fine, because I will wait until this whole thing is resolved, and then I can help myself whatever I need to do.
Right. So I just, I love that example. And didn't you say you got in a good conversation with the person who worked there as well?
Yes, I know him well. I like him very much. He and his wife raise all kinds of sprouts. So they're extremely health conscious, what people eat, what they might want to learn to eat and use. And he's very competent. And so he was working, and so I asked him.
But then it seems to me, by making the decisions you're making and engaging with other people, you need this information, you're not just making a decision about, it's not just affecting you, you're also getting that into the consciousness of the people around you.
I like to learn, and I like to then know that if it was important, to share that. And so, as we said before, if there is this problem, can we remake community by discussing it? And so all of these things somehow get shared. People know, people can handle it.
You've said that you have reduced your waste to a certain point. Are you looking for, do you feel like you're all set, you've got a good system in place? Are you looking for other ways that you can cut back or reduce or reuse? How does that work for you?
I still think that I have ways to go because I do still have trash that I cannot dump, or I can dump it, yeah, but I cannot process it. And I would like to learn more about what I can do with what I have left. You know, anything plastic, anything that has various components such as oil paint or whatever the things are that can't be simply tossed.
I think I can help you with some of that. Oil
Probably.
paint. We have hazardous waste collections. You can bring.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
You know, I have my place in the garage where that stuff goes once a year.
Yeah, we get a lot of.
Yeah, and so I think there is more. More can be done there.
More can be done.
Yeah, I think so.
So I know I keep coming back to these concrete steps, just because I would like, if we were going to give a takeaway to somebody who maybe sees this conversation and feels like, I think I'd like to try this. You know, what would be some beginner steps for somebody who wants to start reducing what they use? You know, I'm thinking even small things like reusable bags or
well,
those are really well known.
I wash all my plastic bags.
Okay.
And they are pinned up like laundry to dry.
Okay.
And I reuse them until they become grungy. And then I take them to the Grand Union to their plastic bag receptacle and stuff them in there. And the other things that I cannot get rid of eventually wind up in what I have to dispose of. But what I was going to say, and I think a lot of people, this brings me back to helping out in a place where a lot of women come with the kids and there have been problems, and you know, or in the food pantry, people don't want to cook. They want to have the canned goods and not the fresh food. And I'm saying, but do you realize what you're missing? Because here you have this pile of cans, of plastic wraps, of cardboard, of plastic wraps. And if you didn't necessarily think that was the only way to go, you could cook from scratch.
And I think that can cost less too.
Cost much less.
Yeah, and cooking from scratch. So I hadn't thought about that. I cook from scratch. Well, now that I'm working a lot less than I used to, but because I like it, it tastes better. It's got better food.
You're a very good cook.
Right, I love to cook, but not everyone does.
Yeah, and I decided when I was working and I was in graduate school and I had 3 kids, what am I going to do to feed them when they come home from school and I'm not necessarily there and they're always hungry? And so I began to devise these extraordinary soup pots with goodies all around and green food and whatnot, and because they are sprouting and growing bigger and bigger and they have to have the appropriate food. And that was fun, and as a consequence, the kids are good cooks. They are gardeners. They do everything.
Right. So you raise, and that's the exciting thing too about when a family goes zero waste and starts thinking this way, is you start raising the next generation who's doing that.
That's exactly right.
Listen, I think it's time for us to wrap up. I'm so glad you came today, Annegret.
Thank you for having me here.
I really appreciate it.
Quite an experience. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to also thank you for watching. This is Zero Waste Central. I am here from the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. If you know anybody who's doing anything around zero waste in the community, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, call me or email me at 229-9383, extension 102, or Cassandra B. at cvswmd.org. I would love to explore having new people as guests. Thank you for watching.